And this session will try to put all of this together on how it's actually impacting people and how it is impacting human security. We have a wonderful panel here with Justin Lin, who is the Dean of the Institute of New Structural Economics in Beijing University. We have also Stephen Hartman, who's the founding executive director of UNESCO Most Bridges Program. And we have Grant Schreiber, who's the general manager of the World Academy of Arts and Sciences. So I will start by setting up the context, and then I'll go to each one of the panelists to discuss the different parts. Now, the context, we just talked about climate change. And actually, one of the results of climate change is increasing food insecurity. And let me give you a few numbers. The number of undernourished people in the world fell from 850 million in 1980 to 650 million in 2015. Then it rose again. It rose again to 735 million today, in 2025. One of the explanations of this is climate change. I work a lot on Africa, and you can see the impact of climate change on agriculture. You can see the impact of climate change on food availability. So that is the first element of human security turbulence in the world, is food insecurity, and it is directly linked to climate change. Second element is displacement. We talked about conflict today and all of the wars around the world and the increasing number of wars. The other side of that coin is the increasing number of refugees, of people who are displaced. In 1990, 25 years ago, no, 1990, yeah, 35 years ago, the number of displaced people in the world was 40 million. Today, it's more than 110 million people displaced. So that is another element of human insecurity, is this huge increase in the number of displaced people around the world. So the third element is economic insecurity. Actually, if you look at the numbers, global figures for extreme poverty, for example, they have declined. It has declined. Over the last 35 years, the number of extremely poor people in the world fell from 1.9 billion to 700 million. And that's mainly because of the decline of poverty in China, by the way. China and India are driving this. But we have a decline in extreme poverty. On the other hand, it is not the extreme poverty alone that makes people feel economically insecure. It is what we economists call vulnerability. It is the people who are very close to the poverty line and who have to count every penny and so on. And that number has remained unchanged for nearly for the last 10 years or so. 3.4 billion people in the world who are categorized as vulnerable people. Now, vulnerability leads to people feeling insecure, but it becomes even worse because they see that when there is a lot of inequality. And what we see inside the different countries is a big rise in inequality. And I'm sorry I'm giving out lots of numbers, but I think it's to set the stage. We economists measure inequality by something called the Gini coefficient. And if you look at inequality of income, of disposable income after taxes, for example, the Gini coefficient, the numbers I'll be using is 0 is total equality, 100 is total inequality. So in the United States, the Gini coefficient increased I'm giving also numbers for the last 35 years, increased from 36 to 42. In China, the increase is even bigger, but that's for obvious reasons, from 32 to 47. But you see that increase all over the world. In the UK, from 32 to 36. In Germany, from 27 to 31. The only country, actually, developed country, where you don't see a big increase in the Gini coefficient of disposable income in the list that I was looking at is France, where there is a lot of redistribution. So the Gini coefficient has been stable at around 30. But if you look at the distribution of wealth, the inequality is even bigger. So the Gini coefficient of wealth in the United States rose from 78 to 85. In the United States, in 1990, the top 1% of the population controlled 23% of the wealth. Today, it controls 1/3 of the wealth. So it was from less than a quarter to 1/3. The bottom 50% only controls 2% of the wealth. But the United States is not the only country where you see this big inequality. Even in Germany, the wealth inequality also increased from 70 to 78 and so on. So economic insecurity remains high, and a rise in inequality. The result of all of that leads me to my fourth issue, which is weakening social cohesion. What is happening is that we look around the world and we see a decline in social cohesion, and it's a little bit what was discussed also when we talked about in the technology session. We see people going to extremes. And there is actually out there, somebody calculates an index called the Political Polarization Index. I found it on the OECD website, the Political Polarization Index, and that is for the whole world. Again, political polarization, which in the year 2000 was the index was 0.3, it's nearly 0.5 now, 0.48. So we see a big increase in political polarization. But social cohesion is not just political, it's also the relations within society. When you ask people, I'm giving you now numbers from polls around the world, global polls, are most people to be trusted? In the year 2000, 32% of the respondents said yes, I trust most people. Today, it's only 25%. So a big decline in trust in one another. Do you trust your government? Well, I was surprised that in the year 2000, 52% of humans trusted their government. Today, it's only 43%. Now, so we see this weakening social cohesion, and finally, as a result of that, we also see democratic backsliding. We see democratic backsliding all over the world, actually. I can give you some numbers also here on. Yes, in the year 2000, 46% of humanity lived in countries that, according to the Freedom House Index, were free. So we had 46% of the population of the world lived in free countries in the year 2000. In the year 2025, only 20%. So from 46% of the population living in countries defined as free, we are now at only 20%. And what struck me actually about democratic backsliding was a Gallup poll in the United States. One of the questions that Gallup asked people in the United States was, do you trust people's democratic judgment that through the democratic process we'll be getting good outcomes? The answer to that in the year 2000 was yes, 74%. In the year 2025 was yes, 53%. So we still have a majority of Americans who believe that the democratic process brings good results, but it's only a slim majority compared to where we were in the year 2000. So this is the problems that we are facing when we talk about human insecurity, turbulent human insecurity, the economic insecurity, the food insecurity, the displacement problem, the weakening social cohesion, and the democratic backsliding as 5 important issues. Now, since I still have the microphone and I don't want to talk too much afterwards, I will offer also a solution to one of the problems. I was dying to speak at the session when they were talking about conflict. And actually, I would like just to put on the table two issues that we need to look at as an economist talking about conflict, is that the problem with politicians is that they don't deal with the root causes of conflicts. And let me explain. I'll give you an example, a real-life example. I was the World Bank's vice president for the Middle East and North Africa for 4 years. During that period, I went regularly to Gaza. That was before October 7. You did not need a PhD in economics or in political science to tell that this place was going to explode. Okay, you walked around Gaza City, there were all those young men hanging around the streets, no jobs, no nothing to do, no work, no money, and they looked angry. Gaza was described, again, I'm talking before the October 7th, Gaza was described by Ilan Pappé, who's one of the leading historians and political scientists in Israel, as the world's largest maximum security prison. They couldn't go out of Gaza, they couldn't go in, bring stuff into Gaza. And so, I love numbers since I'm an economist. So the youth unemployment rate, and I'm talking before this war, was 60% already. The poverty rate was 75%. 80% of households in Gaza depended on assistance, on international assistance, in order to survive. Now, who could think that this can be a sustainable situation? A second point, actually, I will leave it till the end. Justin, over to you.
Okay, it's a long day, and we have already discussed global turbulence, war, conflicts, technological shocks, global warmings, and all those have some negative impact on humanity, on human securities. But so, under this kind of challenges, we, the privileged one, has a responsibility to support those people who are negatively affected, providing the resources, the support, the voice for them. However, equally important, how to avoid similar situation in the future is equally important, especially for the world academy, because fundamentally, ideals is the most important for good or for worse. And so, even the world has a lot of challenges, as I just described. But even under this kind of situation, some countries are doing relatively well. And to be able to provide the basic needs to their people, to ensure the security of their citizens. And also, most countries in the global south, even in favorable external environment, most of them did not do well, cannot ensure the security domestically with all kinds of conflicts, and also could not provide enough basic means for their own people. And because of that kind of situation in the global south, so we have the Millennium Development Goal adopted by the United Nations in the year 2000. We also have Sustainable Development Goals adopted by all the member countries of the United Nations in 2015. So all those goals certainly related to the human securities. And like in other days' session, we have a reflection. We are far behind from achieving those kind of goals. But I think for us, as I said, under current situation, to provide humanitarian support, humanitarian support to the adverse affected people are essential. But we really need to understand how can some countries could do well and most countries failed. There are some lessons we can learn, and from what I see, yes, there's one important lesson. Ideas matters. Because in the past, for countries in the global south, in general, they were taught, and they are also followed, to look at what the advanced countries have and they do not have. And they were taught what they are supposed to own for the developed country, advanced country have. Or to look at what the advanced country can do well, and they could not do well. And they are advised to do what the developed country are doing. Or to look at what the developed country are considering those things are important, and assume those things are also important in a country in global south. And they want to treat that as important and to achieve that. I think those ideas certainly have good intentions. But as a development economist, I have to say, the empirical evidence for the delivery about those kind of approach in general are very poor. You can spend a lot of resources to help the developed country to own what the developed country has, or to do like the developed country, or to implement those kind of things are considered important in the developed country, in the developing world. In end, the results are disappointing. And I find a few successful developing countries. Most of them are in East Asia. East Asian in the post-Second World War were considered as the least hope region in the world by the global development communities. And now reflect, they are doing much better, not only in my country, and Korea, and also Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Vietnam. They are doing much better to deliver those related to human security. And if we reflect, very often in the past 80 years, many policies adopted in East Asia were considered as wrong policies from the global academic communities. but they deliver. They help the people to have the security, to have the means, to have the well-being. And from my own study, I find there's one secret. In general, those few developing countries, they did well in the past. Instead of look at what the developed country have, they look at what they have now. Instead of trying to do, well like in the developed country, they try to do well based on what they have, instead of trying to do like the developed country. And also what are important to them, scale up what they can do well, based on what they have now. And if they have this kind of approach, they can have stability, dynamic growth, and they can provide the job, the increased well-being to the people, and they can achieve internal stability. And also with this approach, they are much better prepared when they have shock from outside. Because on the one hand, their people are empowered. On the other hand, with dynamic economic growth, and the government have more resources to adopt counter-cyclical measures and so on. And so even with some shock, they will be in a much better position to have an internal coherence, internal security, and so on. So what I like to plead is that certainly under current situation, many countries, if we do not give them some support, many people in the country will suffer, they cannot go through. And we have a responsibility. But for us as privileged intellectuals, I think we need to learn in the past in order to have the right ideas that can really help to countries in the global south to have the ability to achieve inclusive, sustainable development, and by that they can improve their well-being continuously, and they can have a much more coherent society, and even they have a shock, they have the ability to support themselves, and by that they can also contribute to a global stability and peace. And so paradigm shifts will be essential. We often say crisis is an opportunity we cannot lose. And with the global turbulence, with the global challenges that emerge almost everywhere and almost every day, I think it's an opportunity for us to have a reflection, to champion for a paradigm shift, especially in terms of development in the global south.
Thanks, Justin. Paradigm shift is certainly something that we need. And let me move right away now. After Justin is Steve.
Okay. Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to, I've tried to listen very carefully today. And what I'd like to do is, in the course of reflecting on some issues that have already come up, and one or two that I can bring up that haven't in quite the way I'm prepared to bring them up. I'd like to explain a little bit about where I come from. I lead a sustainability science program within the context of UNESCO, and it's a global program, and it's a bit different because it has as its center rather than environmental sciences, rather than climate sciences, it has the humanities as its center by design. The idea is that we feel there are reservoirs deep reservoirs of knowledge that are not being tapped into in the science policy nexus. And therefore, in this time now marked by deep social divides, rising mistrust in institutions, and the accelerating pace of planetary crises, the translation of wisdom, of discovery, understanding, and learning generated by diverse, yet always interdependent knowledge systems into meaningful, just, and legitimate action is needed more than ever. So right now, at a time maybe where the UN system, where, let's say, science domains or knowledge domains like the humanities and the arts and indigenous knowledge systems, traditional knowledge systems, are more under threat than ever, we feel the need really to be doubling down here. Climate change is not only an environmental crisis, it's also a crisis of meaning, of trust, and governance. These mutually implicated crises challenge our ability to imagine shared futures and to trust in science and institutions and to act collectively across generations in ways that are going to make a difference for those not yet born, but who are going to have to live with the consequences of the lives we're living now and the way our societies are behaving and the legacy that they're leaving for the future for people and planet. The same can be true, said to be true of all major social and ecological challenges owing to anthropogenic climate change. The humanities, we feel philosophy, history, literature, ethics, and the arts, educational sciences, they're indispensable to our understanding of the transformations now unfolding rapidly around the world, including the potential interventions and solutions on how the most damaging trajectories can be curbed, changed, halted, reversed for the ultimate benefit of people and planet. So many of these fields can help societies make sense of change, of the change that's happening now, how we've gotten to where we are now, and what futures we might be able to build together. They can help us navigate ethical dilemmas and build narratives of hope, fairness, and responsibility. Nevertheless, it has to be acknowledged that the social and policy impact remains largely invisible and underutilized of many of these, what we might call qualitative knowledge domains and academic domains, due to the absence of shared tools to assess their contributions to social transformation, and existing evaluation frameworks tend to privilege quantitative frameworks, short-term outputs, overlooking the deeper cultural and ethical changes that underpin sustainable governance. So this is where our program, Bridges, is working this year through an initiative called Building Bridges from Knowledge to Policy Formulation and Impact, to try to better mobilize expertise from the humanities, from traditional, indigenous, local knowledge systems in this turbulent, rapidly changing world. With that in mind, it's worth sort of pointing out that many of the things that have been said today about the crisis within multilateralism and the UN system generally there are a lot of wise things that have been said about that. And among other things, I heard Her Excellency Ms. Fernanda Espinosa talk about the need to actually be addressing and looking to the needs of the most vulnerable. So this is indigenous communities, this is women, this is children, this is girls. And I think that a successful reform of the UN system, however that is achieved, And I speak from an academic, really, now leading a program that's affiliated and nested within a UN program, but I don't meet at the UN in the way that many of the people in this room sometimes do. I think that a UN system that has more faces around tables like this, that are under 30, that has more faces, that has a greater concentration of perspectives from women, from indigenous communities, would be a successful new trajectory for the UN system. Now, of course, nations or states are the members of UN organizations. That's clear. But I think having gone through many processes before now, through COPs, and being involved in COPs in various ways in the Summit of the Future a couple of years ago, and the lead up to that and the follow through on that, I think that it's probably not a very contentious thing to say we have to do a better job of integrating civil society into the decision-making processes and into the processes of developing ideas that can be put up for agreement by member states. And I think that this is important because in a time of rising populism, we heard this, I think I heard this from Mr. Frank O'Donnell, but I also heard this from Ms. Espinosa's comments that in a time of rising populism, people don't really understand what people are doing in the UN system. So generally out in society, there's a level of abstraction and even abstractification within the processes of the UN that simply seems so far removed from their everyday realities that it's easy for those who wish to exploit elite institutions to cast doubt on these kinds of institutions. And therefore, among many other reasons, I think it's very, very important that we be working to create a more inclusive UN system in whatever new form is developed out of the discussions that see not only the reformation of the Security Council, but also the voices, the perspectives, the experiences that can actually be part of the debates that lead to important policy developments and agreements. I'm going to sort of pause there, except to say that there were so many really vital points made today. I really enjoyed what Katan had to say about, well, I didn't enjoy it, but I found it really, convincing that, yes, AI holds the possibility of helping us to solve many of the crises and issues that we've identified. I agree with Gary when he says the SDGs, though they seem in trouble, and all you ever hear these days is people talking about how the SDGs are in trouble. It's a major accomplishment to have put together the SDG paradigm. And actually, to turn our back on it now seems crazy to me. And so I think we really need to be pushing forward with that work in whatever form it takes beyond 2030. And this requires, I think, being more inclusive. And I think that there's so much at stake that if we don't think about the greater health of general populace, dealing with different kinds of security issues, food security, water security, energy security, looking to synthetic opportunities to be bringing, working more on aligning existing frameworks with one another and getting synergy out of them. So what can we do together with the SDGs, together with the Pact of the Future, the Declaration on Future Generations, the Global Digital Compact, that can actually help to not go back and reinvent the wheel, but build upon the wisdom that saw those instruments developed, and with greater force, also by maximizing the synergies among and between the networks represented in this room and in rooms like this around the world. So more effort that's going to bring these into alignment with one another, create greater coherence and greater cooperation, I think is one way forward, and I hope that that's a version of the multilateral system, inclusive multilateral system that we'll see developing in the years to come. Beyond that, I do agree that there is too great a risk with AI that it can actually be used to break down more the systems and the institutions, if not used wisely. And therefore, the importance of developing frameworks, the kind of framework we heard of from Mila Popovic earlier today, the kind of framework that comes out of the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI, and other successive instruments that have developed coming out of this tradition. I think it's essential that we do that because there's so much more at stake than money, than business. Our very souls, in some ways, are at stake, and the souls of our children and grandchildren, because with the rise of co-agentic AI, this represents a health risk, actually, to our children. What's the psychological, what's the cognitive, what's the emotional impact of ceding agency to an otherwise extractive technology that is actually taking, that is, to put it simply, has the potential of dumbing down the populace. All of these things are interconnected, including what I said before about a more inclusive UN and multilateral system. I wish there was more time to talk because I had a few more points, but I'm going to stop there, and I welcome the rest of this conversation.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much. Actually, I think that your point on making the UN more inclusive is extremely important. I worked for the UN, for FAO, for 5 years, and just having all of those country representatives sitting and talking, they sometimes are somewhere else, not disconnected with reality. And one way of doing that, what you said, is in those committees. For example, the Committee on World Food Security now includes private sector, includes NGOs and civil society. So there are ways of being more inclusive. Thank you very much. Grant, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. What caught my eye on the agenda for today was human security through the lens of people's everyday lives. So I'm going to give you some observations I've seen over the last year, at least, relating to that topic. And I'd firstly just like to draw your attention to the different format of our meeting today, how good it feels to be sitting around the same table facing each other. I think it's changed the dynamic in a very positive way. I think it's symbolic of how we should more widely confront the problem of global insecurity, facing each other face to face. I think face-to-face interactions start helping solve the problem that we've created for ourselves, and it helps us also discover our shared humanity and experiences. The fact that we sit here today with the Iranian border only 130 miles away is testament to the importance of ongoing dialogue. Even when others have decided otherwise, keeping people at the table is crucial. Beyond politics, business leaders too should become more in touch with the human needs of their customers and also recognize their role in reducing turbulence, such as the products they produce, what it might be doing to our health, and especially our mental health. Teaching young people how to communicate effectively by looking real people in the eyes, shaking their hands, and having an inquisitive mind about others, and to occasionally look up from their phones, is one of the biggest skills we can teach our youth today. In times of crisis, we must keep talking. When we stop talking, mistrust creeps in. The probability of misunderstanding increases, and alternate realities emerge. Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa, knew that social turbulence needed to be managed. It didn't happen naturally. Simply taking away social barriers and telling people to get along is rarely enough. He was always conscious about the need to repeat the words and concepts of national unity. As somebody said this week, the words you choose have impact. Mandela declared national symbolic holidays that promoted human interactions, and most importantly, led by example. He showed people how to act. I've always believed we need more psychologists in policy making. They understand human nature, our urges, our desires, and our fears. more than anyone else. The advertising industry is way ahead of us. In the 1950s, they realized that tapping into our human desires with the help of psychologists was the perfect way to sell us things, many of which we didn't really need or were actually unhealthy for us, it turns out. While governments are spending billions on social engineering, brands likewise are spending billions on advertising that tells us how to look, eat, and live. The goal is to make money. They don't really care about us as individuals. I think educating young people on the role of consumerism should be taught in schools. We have 8 billion people on the planet currently being pressured to become middle class. This is creating huge global turbulence. The planet does not have the resources to support 8 billion middle class people. To achieve this, we would need 3 planets the size of Earth. Global turbulence is being made worse by billions of people feeling inadequate and not having enough. As much as we might believe that politics drives societies, it's actually simpler things. Food, love, shelter, abundance, and money. These are key elements that make people feel whole and contribute to human security. How many countries do we know that have a ring of military fire around them, but inside are very insecure? Citizens are hungry, unhealthy, and without rights. Building security from the individual outwards, I think, is a far better idea. The World Academy of Art and Science launched the Human Security for All campaign 3 years ago in collaboration with the United Nations Trust Fund for Human Security. It was the first global campaign on human security and highlighted the importance of putting people at the center of all we do. One of the partners in this campaign is CES, the world's largest technology show that's held in Las Vegas every year. It attracts around 150,000 people from around the world. We realized that technology is a key pillar of human security. Most people have a mobile phone, and most people spend a good deal of time online. The potential to influence people for good is huge. If we manage to convince tech leaders to consider the well-being of humans first, I think this will be a good step in the right direction, which is exactly why we attend the event every year. One of the things that struck me in January this year at CES when I was attending was the huge amount of robots and AI that have been designed to look like humans. They've got bodies, arms, and most importantly, faces. They are made to look like us and made to look likable. A robot with 2 arms is not very effective. Robots are supposed to be an upgrade of humans. So why doesn't it have 10 arms? Wouldn't that be far more productive? I think we are being deceived by an alternate reality which goes against human emotions. We are already being captured as digital assets for advertisers who use their surveillance of us to sell things. Supermarket products now show different prices to different people based on the information that the digital price tag picks up from your mobile phone as you go past. It's already got a name: surveillance capitalism. We have become products without even realizing it. Doubting our decisions is already a red flag for me of rising global turbulence. This is already on top of fake images, fake videos, and fake news. Doubting reality used to be a sign of madness, yet we are being told to embrace it as the next big thing. Anyone who uses ChatGPT or any other interactive AI knows that the response you get is always pleasant. It never disagrees with you. It's always complimentary. But that is not human nature. We are complex emotional beings who are sometimes in a bad mood or are sharp with each other. ChatGPT has also never asked me anything. How am I feeling? How's my day going? The complexity of human emotions teaches us from an early age to navigate the human experience and how to deal with people. A source of future global turbulence might be gaps in our emotional intelligence from dealing with only pleasant conversations. Difficult conversations, in my opinion, are far more valuable in fostering peace. AI and tech does not reflect the full range of human emotions necessary for solving human problems. A recent report in New Scientist magazine explained how all the major AI chatbots, ChatGPT, Google, Anthropic, and others, were recently given a hypothetical war scenario to resolve. From the thousands of responses received, 95% of the solutions that the AI came up with included the launch of a nuclear weapon to resolve the problem. There was not one solution that considered surrender as an option. There was not one solution that suggested compromise. They were all playing to win. What was missing was compassion, human empathy, and ethics. We need to keep many decisions firmly with humans. To end, I'll give you an example of one of the founding fellows of the World Academy, Robert Oppenheimer, who once wrote a very philosophical piece on the role of science in humanity. In it, he speaks of the narrow footpaths that connect villages, the webs that connect people and communities. We see them clearly as we walk on them. He then says that scientists developed rockets and went up into space. They saw a much bigger picture. They assumed that this option was more superior and this technology was better. But what happens the higher you rise? The small paths disappear. They are no longer visible. We lose sight of that which binds us. I leave you with an appeal that we always remember the small paths that connect and bind us as humans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grant. We have an hour, so we've spent 45 minutes. So we can open the floor for comments, suggestions, questions. And Frank, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just want to mention that in Vienna, before I left to come here, I met a robot in Sobieski Platz, near the Volksopera, and shook hands with this robot. It was a Uni-3 robot, the same sort of thing that I think Chancellor Merz saw massively performing in a multitude, in a well choreographed gymnastics in Beijing. This robot in Vienna belongs to Emily Kate Janatowski, who's a Harvard graduate from New Yorker and California together, doing a PhD in Vienna University, and she's been living with this robot for a year. And the point of her research is to find out what's it like to live with a robot, and what are the kinds of values issues that arise, and what kinds of regulatory problems arise. For example, if she brings her robot on the metro and has it sit down, does she have to pay a ticket for the robot? And things like this. So it's just wanted to mention it. She's a TED talker, and her name is Emily Kate Janatowski with a G.
Yes, Elena, go ahead.
I'd like to thank the speakers that Stephen and Grant. I'd like to thank them specifically for bringing into our conversation, as well as our colleague here, the issue of values and ideals and human realities, the issue of qualitative data, the issue of the crisis of meaning and trust, which Mila also spoke about, that are essential issues when we're trying to think about a multilateral governance of a new kind. And also the issue of how we show up, how we are present. Perhaps if the system is breaking down so intensely, it is time we ask ourselves why it is breaking down. And I think this question was addressed beautifully by the two of you, and also helped by our colleague who also mentioned that we have to understand the values, the aspirations, and the ideals of other cultures. We have to speak to the human spirit. Then policies make sense. And then the United Nations, the policies of governance, do not seem so strange, so distant from human lives, but actually a continuation of human lives. And perhaps when we think about a multilateral system that can be sustainable, given the enormous transformations and also the fast pace of change that was brought up earlier today, that would be a system that people can understand is coherent with their lives, it's coherent with their aspirations, and it's also coherent with the fundamental human need for meaning. There is no greater crisis than the crisis of meaning. We have so much psychology that has shown us that people survive with not even their basic needs met as long as they can find meaning. And reversely, you can take care of people's basic needs, but when there is no meaning to latch onto, people actually do not make it. So I really want to extend my gratitude to these colleagues who brought up these topics, qualitative topics that need to inform everything else that is the science policy nexus, as you brought it up. There are certain things in the science policy nexus that are very well articulated, very well understood. This particular dimension really needs to be elaborated deeply and to be integrated in the way we have all of our conversations, not some of them on the side, but really all of our conversations on policies. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else would like to ask a question? Yes, Gary.
I'd just like to add to a theme that's come out very well in the last two panels. So it may sound a little repetitive, but I just want to emphasize it. Grant mentioned that we had been engaged by the UN on a human security campaign for the last 3 years. But before they actually signed us up for the campaign, they gave us an assignment to do a survey on perceptions of human security, starting with the UN agencies, and then governments, and then universities, science academies, and NGOs. And what we found is, the further we went down this list in the order I gave, the less awareness there was of what we meant by human security, or what the UN meant by human security. And so we went back to them, and when we were asked to submit a proposal to the government for a campaign, we said the whole campaign has to be reversed, because the UN does wonderful work, but the whole orientation was on communicating with policymakers, communicating with decision makers in government. And I'm raising it as important in the context of what Grant said about the turbulence is very much related, our conclusion has been, to the sense of increasing insecurity that people had because of the speed of change. And AI happens to be a dramatic example of that, because the projections about unemployment and everything, and not only for the youth, but even for those who are in jobs, how long is the job going to last after that? So my central point that we concluded was, you need a campaign that addresses the people, not the policymakers, not the diplomats, not the people at the top of the institutions. They understand it. And in fact, we have conducted for the last year and a half in Indian schools, introducing the themes of human security from grade school, from second, third, fourth grade, all the way up, in a very practical way. One of the reasons, and I don't attribute it all to this, but one of the reasons the momentum on the SDGs hasn't gone further, much further, because after all, it is the formula for the future of humanity, is we've not succeeded in communicating that to the people who are supposed to vote for it, to the people who are supposed to appreciate it. And that may also be one of the reasons why multilateral system doesn't get as much support as it should from the foundations of global society. We understand there was a time when communicating with the general population was impossible. It made sense that if we're going to have global government, we've got to start with governments, because they're the only ones who talk to each other in a systematic way, and we had the facilities for it. But today, through the social media, through the internet. We have the capacity to reach out to billions of people. But our orientation, we're still talking at the policy level. And so we recommended to the UN back in a few years ago, what we really need is a global social movement addressing the people. I was asked, and I'll finish with this, I don't want to, I was asked to address an international conference in Europe on public health workers. And I said to them that one theme came up was about climate, and I asked them, what are you doing about climate change? And there was a bizarre look on their faces. Well, you know, we're public health workers. When the problems come, we try to address them. I said, yeah, but the medical profession is the closest, most respected profession in the world. The scientists are an abstraction. The engineers are far removed. The diplomats are far removed from the perception of the public. But you have the closest physical contact, and all the studies show the highest respect and trust is among the medical profession. And just at that time, the World Health Organization came out with a study that said the single greatest threat to human health in the world is climate change. Then, isn't it the medical profession that should be taking the lead on this and communicating to the public, which they have a contact with, to change their awareness and raise the sense of urgency for them to be moving it from bottom up, rather than just waiting for the message to be trickling down. And I think it's a theme that has been reflected in many of the comments today. We're still not connecting with global society at the level we should. They're connecting to the sense of insecurity because they feel it. They see the things that are going on all of the time. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gary. And what you're saying also, I think reinforces the point that Stephen was making about needing to open up the multilateral system to more interaction with civil society, or actually a bigger role for non-government actors. It should not just be the intergovernmental process on its own is not sufficient, I think. I think that's... Mariana, go ahead, please.
Just a comment on what you're just saying. Actually, we're not communicating, but the people are communicating exactly the opposite right now. So that's what we're up against. So it's not easy. So we need to engage more with the Anthropics of the world and support them with the Google. Because if you look at the people who are actually driving them, they are going along with us. Another thing that I'd like to point out is, because you mentioned, Grant, you mentioned robots. Robots are going to be able to be doing things that it's very, very difficult for humans. Like, complex thinking, collaborative, everything that is easy for people, they won't be able to do. So this is how the society, the entire workforce is going to change. It will have to change toward more plumbers, nurses, what robots can actually not do, like support of mental support, all of the other things. And this is why I think we can learn a lot from China, from the gentleman with China. You guys are doing you're leading the way how we should be working with and engaging with artificial intelligence, and how many hours we should restrict our children to get access to these systems and so on. So we need to become more thorough on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Mariana. I think we have like 5 minutes left, so Maila, you asked for the floor. Go ahead.
I would like to acknowledge something that's happening right now together with you. The beauty of what we're doing right now and the beauty of AI Allow that category to happen in your mind. The beauty of AI is that it made us, forced us to ask these questions. So I've always repeated that the quality of human decision depends on the quality of questions we ask. And whether you're a ChatGPT user or Claude user or you're a philosopher of new technology, you know that that's true. The output you get depends on the quality of your input and its guidance. So what's happening right now is that we are developing ethical imagination and true collective intelligence for the first time. And we are mirrored back by our own tools that we're wielding to have to face ourselves that way. So in the spirit of the quality of questions that we're asking at the exact right time, without fear that we are belated, please, we cannot give in to that. But the question that I would ask is, where do you observe that humans are losing orientation faster than they're gaining capabilities? What kinds of decisions must remain irreducibly human, even if the systems become more competent than us, and why? So I think what excites me about this, that our collective mind is awakening, and mind you, in a moral sense. So the question I have for myself for collective intelligence is, how do you design a beautiful mind? How do you have a beautiful mind? It's going to require ethical, aesthetic, and ecological coding. For that which returns us back to the very foundations of our morality, that which is true, good, and beautiful, that is still alive in us and needs to manifest properly through the devices that we have to manifest it. So here's to a beautiful collective mind I hope we're designing here.
Thank you, Mala. There is actually a movie. I wanted to wrap up to thank you all, and especially our three panelists, but all of you who also contributed to this fascinating discussion. Thanks a lot.